a knowledge of the past, then it's very difficult to project a sense of history into one's community and one's self. Discovery, of course, remains extremely important for any area, any segment of children's literature. And volition, implying this sense of agency, is one of the most remarkable achievements that any young man, young woman can achieve in this process of becoming part of a community, but also a distinct individual. So with that context, what I would like to do is to have as much of a dialogue as possible with the authors and illustrators in the panel, and pass the microphone back and forth as needed, and moderate only if they require moderation, otherwise to let them say what they have to say.
I'd like to talk very personally about what the Tomas Rivera Book Award means to me and to my community, the broader community that I come from. The children, the grandparents, the young adults searching for an identity of who they are, and for many years seeing no reflection of themselves in the books that surrounded them. And I think it's very important to understand what happened before the Tomas Rivera Book Award existed. You see, we as Mexican Americans were the spoils of war. We were the conquered people, or the way my friend Raquel Valles Sentías puts it in one of her book titles, the ones that Santa Anna sold. We were the ones left behind. And for those of you who think that Mexican Americans are like half Mexican and half American, we're that native culture that was spread all along the southwestern part of the US, which used to be the northeastern part of Mexico, before Mexico gave up a third of its property in the war between Mexico and the US. We were the conquered peoples, but with US citizenship. So we, for 100 years, watched the flags change and the governments change and the languages change and our rights change, our property be taken away. A lot of people don't know that for many years, our language was forbidden by law to be spoken on school grounds. And all of my pre-college years were spent in the reality of these paddles in the classrooms where we had a predominance of Mexican American kids. These paddles weren't for decoration or for music making. They were hard wooden paddles with holes cut in them so they travel faster, so that if any child, whether you were 6 or you were 18, made the mistake of saying a word in their native language, it was paddled straight out. Well, it didn't really work, but it was paddled anyway. The rule was, in my school and most schools that I heard of, one SWAT for every word in Spanish. And the judging was done by people who didn't speak Spanish. So if a little kid was out in the playground, real excited about a race that was being run by their friends and said, "Córrele, Juanito!" the teacher might come up and say, "Sounds like 10 words to me." We have long words in Spanish, and "Córrele, Juanito" is actually 2 words or 1 word and a name. So kids were forced to give up their language, and it left us, and I say us because I was in there, feeling mute, feeling like we were being punished for a crime. The environment in which books and schooling survived was one that saw Mexicans as dirty Mexicans. The word Mexican was a dirty word. Not in Mexico, but where I grew up, in San Antonio. We were the majority of the population, but we were below everyone else on the social scale. So Mexicans from Mexico, especially if they were professional or from a higher socioeconomic status, weren't even called Mexicans when they got to Texas. They were called Latin Americans, which elevated them. We were the Mexicans. They were important, so they were Latin Americans. They were worthy people. There were signs on the restaurants and the hotels and the swimming pools that said, no dogs, niggers, or Mexicans allowed. This was our history. This was where we came from. So we grew up without a lot of positive images of Mexican Americans in books or movies or the society, and we grew up very hungry to see ourselves as kids. Kids want to see themselves in a book. They want to see something they can identify with. Say, oh, I did that too, or my grandma does that, or my dad said that once, or we did that together with my cousins. They want something they can identify with. We didn't have that. So we'd grab at straws or sometimes myths. You know, we'd say things like, Charles Bronson, did you see him? He looks real Chicano, right? Yeah, I think he is. Yeah, I think his name is Carlos Bronson. He changed his name to Charles Bronson, you know? So it sounded more gringo, so they give him the job, you know? Or we'd see Beretta on TV. I don't know how many of you remember Robert Blake as Beretta. I still think he changed his name. You know, he was dark skinned, he had dark hair, he walked like a pachuco. We said Barrera, his name was Barrera. I know it was. He just changed his name. I don't think that's true, but that's what we believed at the time. And if we saw somebody on the credits that said Daniel Moran, we'd say, I think it's Daniel Moran. We were hungry, and that hunger wasn't fed by the books that surrounded us. So I just wanted you to understand the context we lived in at the time that the Tomas Rivera Awards began to be awarded. I just want to ask you to think about what it feels like to have your face erased, to have your history invisible, to have your tongue silenced. So, that doesn't mean we were without an appreciation of literature. We had an oral literature that we had kept alive for centuries. We had stories of La Llorona, 500 years old. El Cucuy, I don't know how old he was. Our grandmothers and aunts taught us to declamar poetry. These are people that might not even know how to read or write, certainly might not know how to speak English. Mine didn't. But she sat me on her lap and she taught me a poem, one line at a time. Rin, rin, ranacuajo salió una mañana muy tierno, muy majo. No salgas, hijito, le dice mamá, pero él asumía estoy llorando, se va. And it'd go on for the next 30 verses like that. None of us understanding what I was saying. I was 5 years old. But I could declaim a poem because it was important in our cultural tradition, and it was oral. But we didn't have the affirmation in the books. For those of us who had a hunger to write, publishers did not see Mexican American issues as being important. So when the Tomas Rivera Book Award was first announced, some publishers didn't quite get it. They would go get one of their favorite authors that knew nothing about Mexican American culture and say, you know that story you've been writing? Look, they got this new award up there. Just change the names to Paco and Maria and make the faces brown. We'll send it in. You're bound to get it. And the committee would take those books that were obviously totally ignorant of Mexican American culture, that were just superficially coated with Mexican American culture, and would set them aside. Just like, no, not really. Instead, they would pick books like The Three Little Pigs, Tito, Nacho, and Miguel. They were really subversive books because, I mean, like Miguel was the smartest and the darkest of the three pigs. So we're giving different messages than what had been heard before in children's literature in this country. They developed and awarded picture book biographies of Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, you know, a poet in the 1600s, and Tomas Rivera himself, or stories about a migrant child in a time period when our language and our culture and our value was denigrated. And instead of just showing Mexican Americans as criminals and maids, and maybe if we're lucky, a singer or something, they awarded books that embraced the diversity, the non-monolithic nature of our culture. They showed Mexican Americans as university professors and as dancers and in a variety of capacities. There were stories that you will find among these award winners that are about young Latino boys on the edge of manhood who struggling psychologically to survive sexual abuse. Books that openly address the issue of immigration from a young person's perspective. So these are the kinds of things that for me, the Tomas Rivera Award is most significant for. It opened up the world, not only of publishing, but the world of children who needed to see their own reflections. And it gave us a sense of claiming a right to be here. For younger children, things like what can you do with a paleta said, your neighborhood is a beautiful place. The cultural things that happen to you are worthy of being celebrated in a book. And for older children, I'm